Hello, today we're going to talk about cross-sectional studies. A cross-sectional study is a type of descriptive or observational study. These are pretty straightforward study designs, and typically they're known as surveys. Cross-sectional studies are called such because they are a slice in time. Some people will call it a cross-section in time. All of the data are collected at the same time. So, for instance, in a survey study, we ask the questions one after the other, and that's the end of the study. There is no long-term follow-up. There is no looking backwards in time. It's just asking all of the questions at the same time. There's also different descriptive studies that are cross-sectional studies, such as if we looked at blood results and just looked at them all at the same time when they were collected. And so they're not always surveys, but most frequently cross-sectional studies are surveys. So let me show you a couple of cross-sectional studies. This cross-sectional study is looking at measles in the United States in 2015. This is in the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report and was created by the CDC. So the purpose of the study was to update surveillance data on current measles outbreak. And they looked at as many reportable cases of measles that they had. And what they found was that during that time period, they had 159 cases. They stated in the study that over 80% of the cases occurred among persons who were unvaccinated or had unknown vaccination status. This really identified that there was still a need for vaccinations. There was a lack of herd immunity, as we learned in a previous lecture. And so in this study, they said that there were 4 outbreaks, and one of them accounted for 70% of all measles cases this year. So what I'd like to point out is that this cross-sectional study is just a one-time cross-section looking at all of the cases that they had to date and doing a descriptive analysis on it. What they could do is just ask pretty much everybody in the United States, have you had measles this year? And that's essentially what this was. But here's a different type of cross-sectional study. This is alcohol use and alcohol-related problems among adolescents in China, a large-scale cross-sectional study. So in this study, they looked at what is the prevalence of alcohol drinking and alcohol-related problems among Chinese adolescents, but then they also explored different risk factors and connections. So what they did was they had a survey that was anonymous, and they had junior high and senior high school students complete this survey. And they asked them to self-report alcohol use, alcohol-related problems, school factors, family factors, and psychosocial factors. What they found was that current drinking among students had a prevalence rate of 7.3%, and that 13.2% of students reported having alcohol-related problems. That portion of the study is considered descriptive analysis. However, then they also compared some of the results. What they found was that having poor classmate relations, having poor relationships with teachers, and below average academic achievement were all positively associated with current drinking. All of these different relationships were statistically significant. This is inferential analysis. And so what they actually did in this study was they didn't just describe, but they also hypothesized and used statistical testing to determine if there were relationships. One of the problems with looking at these types of relationships, though, is we don't know which came first. Did the drinking come first, and then there were problems with teachers? Or were there problems with teachers, and then there was drinking? Were there classmate problems, which led to lower academic achievement, which then led to drinking? Or were there drinking problems, which led to reduced academic achievement, which then led to poor classmate relations. It's hard to know the timing of what came first in this type of study. So there's a few potential biases that can occur in cross-sectional studies. The first is survival bias. If people die and we do a survey, we can't include those people within our survey, obviously. And so the people who have passed may have had different characteristics than the people we're actually studying. There's also something called selection bias. And what this means is that people who are in the study that we select or who volunteer for it may be very different than people who don't volunteer for the study or participate. Some people are willing, some people are not, and that might be based on certain characteristics that could factor into the study. For example, if we were studying the prevalence of drinking, who do you think might not want to fill out the survey? Perhaps students who are currently drinking or having problems with drinking. Also, if we have people who are not healthy enough, whether it be physically or psychologically, they also may not want to fill out the survey. What if it's someone who is depressed because they don't have any friends, or they're struggling with teachers, or they're having academic difficulties, and they decide they just don't want to fill it out? Well, it's hard for us to then measure, are they having drinking problems if they don't fill it out? And is that an associated factor? There's also timing confusion. As I said, we don't always know which came first. Did the drinking come first? Did the academic problems come first? And also truthfulness. We have to realize that not everyone's going to be honest with survey responses. And this is where we sometimes have huge problems because people aren't willing to state, yes, I'm having academic difficulties, or yes, I've been drinking and it's a problem, or yes, I have problems with fellow students or with teachers. And so making sure that there are cross-checks, if that's possible, is sometimes very beneficial, but not always included in a cross-sectional study. So these studies are actually a very low level of evidence. They are not used for determining much other than what needs to be studied further. In future lectures, we'll be talking more about higher level studies and how cross-sectional studies may lead to cohort studies or clinical trials. So please let me know if you have any questions.